Throughout this project, I relied on a stream of feedback. The aim of using feedback was to give me guidance and an idea of the changes and steps I needed to make to produce a piece of work that was as good as possible, both narratively and editorially. The type of feedback I received changed as my project evolved. As I began each new stage, I needed a sense of what I was doing and how I would do this. My first formal written feedback was in my questionnaire. After that, I moved to a series of written peer assessments focusing on my animatic and edits. Then finally, I used a focus group consisting of members of my target audience. I chose to start with a questionnaire because it was quick, taking around 2 minutes to complete, and gave some simple written answers to creative issues I was stuck on. By engaging with a prospective target audience like this pushed me into making decisions on the story in pre-production and editing in post-production. Unfortunately, as I moved further into the project, I found myself neglecting some of the commitments I made as a result of the feedback in my questionnaire. For instance, my audience's advocacy for a violin was a huge misjudgment from my part. The instrument did not work well when used in my finished project, with me opting for a synth instrument instead. One of the biggest misdirections I made as a result of feedback was when I tried to define my target audience. More often than not, I found responses lacking clarity. As a result, I thought it best to send my film to a primarily female target audience. But as the conventions of horror and thriller became more pronounced in my film, I decided to shift my target audience towards men instead. This shift was encouraged by the informal verbal feedback I was receiving during my post-production, shortly after completing my first edit. Generally, I found informal feedback from people just casually watching early edits of my film to be much better at noticing flaws in editing than myself, who had watched the clips 10 times over and was probably unaware of specific issues. The closer I reached completing my film and other products, the more beneficial I found audience feedback. This is because as my project developed and matured, as did the questions become more specific and ever more relevant to the choices I was making. At various stages, I struggled to find written feedback useful. This is because many of the answers I received were very minimal. For example, one response simply stated, "not central," when referring to my framing during my film. Similar responses left me no indication of how to correct my work, and were sometimes just criticisms. I thus found myself going out my way to catch up with these peers for further explanation. I did, however, find verbal feedback, most notably in my focus group, really useful because the ability to get my audience to expand or elaborate on a point was very beneficial. When discussing the music I produced, comments on volume and the deployment of this music encouraged me to expand on these successes during my second and third edits. This is because my audience was able to talk about the questions of my choosing, like the representation of characters, and I was able to find more meaningful analysis that had a direct influence on my production. As already identified in previous questions, my primary target audience consists of males from the ages of around 16 to 21. This reflects the gender and age of the film's main character. My secondary audience is females, also around 16 to 21 years of age. And like my primary audience, this reflects other female characters within my film. The use of gratification theory focuses on why the public uses media, rather than what the media consists of and how it affects people. Using this theory, I have identified that my audience would primarily use film for entertainment. I have drawn this conclusion because of the film's adherence to the thriller and horror genre, which conventionally provides an adrenaline-filled escape from reality. This adrenaline appeals primarily to men and is one of the factors that form my target audience. However, there is also a case in favor of social interaction gratification, this being because of my film's focus on social issues like abuse and that it follows a young couple. My approach to feedback has seen a dynamic shift. Instead of taking peers' comments as something that must be adhered to as closely as possible, I used feedback as more of a loose guideline. However, this isn't to say that I did not find feedback useful. From an editorial perspective, the feedback I received was very beneficial. Peer assessments praised my editing, which gave me confidence in my choice to pace shots slowly, but also highlighted to me where editing could be improved, such as with inconsistent lighting and poorly done shot-to-shot transitions. Where the story is concerned, my feedback from my focus group made me aware of how my film's interpretation of women was received in really contrasting ways. One of my focus group members, Amelia, shown here on the left, criticised the representation of women as weak and as subordinates. On the other hand, an informal comment made by another member of my secondary audience described to me how they enjoyed the representation of a strong, dimensional female character like Mia, who, although they perceived as evil, was an interesting and unconventional character.